Okay, so some of this is just going to be me arguing with the internet, which is a waste of time, but brace yourself. But for some reason, people decided to head to Cagematch, which is a very good wrestling website, by the way, and you should check it out. And they started going through all the fan ratings going, ha ha ha, these must be the worst wrestlers alive. So then somebody decided we should run down these 20 people, and that's what I'm going to do right now, and for a lot of them, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Sound good? I'm Simon Miller. Let's go. Number 20, Rodney. From the Mean Street Posse. I mean, for goodness sake. Now Rodder's clocks in at 1.54 out of 10, but riddle me this, my friends. Was he ever actually pitched as a serious wrestler? No, he wasn't. He was part of the Mean Street Posse, like I say, which was Shane McMahon's crew. And that was sort of the joke. Ha ha, he snuck his buddy in, and he doesn't actually know what he's doing. But if you ever tuned in expecting Rodney to have a 5-star classic, I think you may be the problem, and him and Joey Abs and the other one, which I actually think was the real wrestler, whatever you want to talk about, they were just so much fun. When I think about them now, they fill me with glee. There you go. I just remembered it was Joey Abs that was the quote-unquote real wrestler. But do not forget, the so-called non-workers also had that wonderful match with the Stooges on Raw, and it was the silliest thing I've ever seen in my life. That's why I often go back and watch it. But I'm sure even if you saw Rodney in the street, he would totally understand his role. So this one is ridiculous. And in terms of understanding the assignment, Rodders gets it. Number 19, Mark Madden. 1.41 out of 10, and this one is also drowning in noise, because Mark Madden was a commentator. Now this was in WCW, and go look at the information. Anytime he did step in the ring, this is when World Championship Wrestling was genuinely the most insane product you've ever seen in your life. As such, somebody decided, well, we should put Mark in hilarious situations, which is why one of his matches was against Mean Gene Okerlund. I mean, they even had a tag team bout. Tank Abbott also beat him up a few times, but even when you go to Cagematch, he only has 2 official inputs when it comes to matches he did have. So I think this is mostly because fans found him a bit annoying, and he does have a tendency to run his mouth off. But I don't think we should be rating him as a pro wrestler, my friends. I mean, the whole thing is quite frankly ludicrous. Number 18, Rocking Rebel. So while Rocking does have a 1.4 out of 10 Cagematch rating, his last match was in 2018. Now, given his first bout was in 1989, I think that's a pretty good run. So even though he never actually set the wrestling world on fire, if when you took your first bump, someone said, oh yeah, you're probably going to have a 20-year career, but damn, that's all right. Now, a lot of the talk here is because Double R was part of the original ECW before it became that ECW, and he even had matches with the Sandman. Now, the problem is, when you hear the name Sandman, you expect a certain something from a match. When you go watch this, well, it's just a traditional wrestling match because we haven't changed the business yet. Ultra Clash 1993 is when it really went bad because these two weren't on the same page. But I wouldn't say that Rebel was a terrible wrestler. He just had an off night. When you also go through his entire run as well, it seemed like his lane was in tag team matches. And he also took on the Honky Tonk Man. Now listen, I wrestle, and have I ever fought the Honky Tonk Man? No, I have not. So Double R's done way better than me. I mean, sometimes, genuinely, my friends, wrestling is just about going out there and having these experiences. So I don't think we need to worry about it. Number 17, Eva Marie. All right, I am going to get mad, so let's just get it out there. 1.28 out of 10. And yes, look, we do know that some Eva Marie matches did not go to plan, and she would often bump off nothing. But dare I say, buddies and pals, that maybe, just maybe, somebody in WWE should have allowed her to train a little bit more before going, well, she's really attractive, let's put her on TV. Now, even though this did happen, she was still able to make a name for herself, because do you remember that gimmick when she was meant to have a match, and then somebody would announce on the loudspeakers, oh, she's not actually going to do this because she's, like, fixing her car? Was genuinely quite entertaining. And that is what wrestling can be, or at least a part of it. And also, if you go back to 2015, when she had that match with Bayley in NXT, well, it's pretty good. Because everybody sat around and went, well, this is this sort of judgmental opinion on Eva Marie, so why don't we play into that? And even though it's an overbooked mess, once again, it's actually fun. So again, no, Eva was never going to be top 10 in the PWI list, but I think if we'd actually given her some time to practice and get comfortable in the ring, with all the other traits she did have, she would not be in any worst wrestlers ever list. She just wasn't given a fair chance, so I am flicking this one out the window. Number 16, the Giant Gonzalez. All right, look, this one is a little bit hard, because even The Undertaker, who was one of his most famous opponents, was like, I don't really like working with him. He had 2 left feet. Now, of course, the Giant Gonzalez had a job in wrestling, because he was a legit 7 feet tall, So as soon as you saw him, you're like, well, I think I should probably follow that human being, because he's massive. It's why both WCW and the WWF used him. But again, he was on such gargantuan proportions that trying to do anything athletic was basically impossible. I would guess his most famous match was at WrestleMania 9, where he did take on The Undertaker. Don't forget, this is part of the WrestleMania streak, but The Undertaker only won via disqualification because the Giant Gonzalez made him pass out with chloroform. Doesn't surprise you that WWE doesn't talk about that very much. Kind of goes to show, though, that even against the Phenom, Vince McMahon didn't want to beat him properly. And what we really should be discussing, and what should really be in the list, is what was the deal with that weird hairy muscle suit. I mean, there is no way, even if he never lifted one weight in his life, that he looked worse under whatever that was. When I was a kid, I used to wake up having nightmares about that thing, because it's totally disgusting. Right, we good? Let's move on. Number 15, Eli Cottonwood. 1.10 out of 10 for old Eli Cottonwood. Somebody else who didn't really have any time to improve. Now, he was a bit like the Giant Gonzalez because he was a tall guy, but he also had that infamous match with Caval or Low-Key down at NXT. Look, that is quite amusing, because you can see Low-Key getting really mad, but there's nothing he can do about it. Now, a huge reason why people do mention Eli and why he gets into lists like this is because of that infamous promo he cut on NXT, and this was when NXT was a game show and everybody involved was rookies. Because from nowhere, he was told to cut a 10-second promo about a moustache, when he decided basically to describe what a moustache was. It lives under your nose. I'm looking around and these people have moustaches. So now I have chosen to grow a moustache, which makes me a real man. So by accident, he had just also said, in terms of today, he's not a real man. Now listen, intentional or not, I think this is comedy gold because it makes me laugh out loud. And you do have to remember, he was as green as grass here. So what do you think he's going to do? I mean, every single beginner is in this position, unless you're Kurt Angle. Let me tell you this, nobody is Kurt Angle. He was the best, and this was actually better than him cutting some boring promo. It's genuinely so stupid. So as far as I'm concerned, Cottonwood, you all right. Number 14, Asia. So look, this is spelled A-S-Y-A, and she was only called Asia because WCW wanted their own version of China. That is literally the levels we're talking about. I mean, when you are basing on something as shallow as that, you're always going to run into problems. This was somebody else that basically had no training, hence why she only got a 1.07 out of 10 cage match rating. It also didn't help that when she was brought into WCW, everything was such a mess. Because they were desperate to keep up with the WWE, they essentially told Asia, just do what China does. But here's a shock horror fact. She wasn't China. Her debut was also teaming with Dean Malenko taking on David Flair and Tori Wilson, and you could already see the foibles with that. In fact, what we should have done is Asia versus Dean. Malenko would have made her look like $1 million. A singles match against Medusa on WCW Saturday Night wasn't really that much better, but I think a huge problem with this is that every single fan on the planet could see through it. It was so transparent and it was a bit stupid. It also comes down to having no patience, because imagine if we had seen Asia and gone, oh, we're going to turn you into a monster, well then maybe you would have had a similar star. Instead, all of this was done in a few months. Number 13, Christa Joseph. And he was a writer that got rolled out onto TV and was told to wear a thong and grease himself up. Quite frankly, it's amazing he's got a 1.03 out of 10 wrestling rating. Who the hell gave him one? But yes, this was Big Dick Johnson, who would often appear in the mid-2000s, mostly because Vince McMahon didn't have any other competition, and he wanted to make himself laugh. Look, you can go see all these on YouTube. Let me tell you, they ain't funny. It's also why he got involved in the McMahon D-Generation X feud, because again, Vince just thought this was good for lols. That's all I've got to say about it. I wouldn't give him any kind of a rating, because even though he was technically in matches, I mean, obviously rating his skill level wasn't the point. Still, this was bottom of the barrel stuff, and when I remember it, it makes me want to stop wrestling. There's nothing we can do about that. Number 12, Nicole Bass. So if you do want to get a better look into the life of Nicole Bass, I strongly suggest you go listen to the Crime in Sports podcast episode about her. They really did go and find out all the information. It also sounds like she didn't have an easy life, and also she tragically passed away a few years ago. So I'm not going to rag on her massively, but yes, she does get a 0.85 out of 10 rating. I really do feel like it's the same as what we've already talked about, though, because WWE just felt like they needed another jacked woman because they had China. So they found Nicole Bass and decided, well, we could give you a month to train, or we could just have you do it on the job. Guess which option they picked. She did have a bit of a name too, because she was so big. I mean, Nicole was actually entering female bodybuilding contests, but she wasn't winning. But even then, Everyone was just like, how has someone got that much size? Bass was also very vocal about the fact that she didn't have any training, and she also had a sexual harassment lawsuit against the WWE. So none of this is fun at all. Nicole still found some extra fame because she was a part of Howard Stern's extra crew as well. And actually, when she was on that show, sometimes she would pour her heart out. So once again, I just think she needed a little bit of help. And that's not to say her matches were good, because they weren't, but again, I think there's more to this. If nothing else, Nicole Bass was a bit of a troubled soul. Number 11, Brackus. Now, I love Brackus because he's so easy to talk about. Because basically his run came in the mid-90s where Vince McMahon was like, we just need big dudes. And somebody found a Mr. Universe. Vince was like, that'll do. So we just turned him into a wrestler. If only it was that easy. Now, 0.76 out of 10 actually feels a little bit harsh because, again, this is based on fan ratings, meaning it's very unlikely anybody saw his house show run when Brackus was taking on Mr. X. Now, that wasn't the guy from the Nintendo game Kung Fu, but it was Tom Pritchard under a mask. And I'm sorry, if Mr. Pritchard is working with anyone, well, the match itself would be half decent. He was then put against the likes of Billy Gunn, Bill Dundee, and Mosh from the Headbangers. While those three guys know what they're doing, I don't think any of them is capable of bringing Brackus to a good match. The big chat, of course, comes when he was traded to ECW for a little while, when ECW was working with the WWF, and he had to have a match with Taz. Now, this does not go very long, and Taz whoops his ass, but my gosh, I would love to hear Taz talk about this. It could not have been fun at all. So really, this one is just a bit silly and an experiment that did go wrong. At least it was over pretty quickly. Number 10, Hard Body Harrison. Another 0.76 out of 10, but I'm just going to be honest with you, my friends. I do not care what Hard Body Harrison did in professional wrestling. I don't care who he fought, I don't care what titles he won, and I don't care what promotions he popped up in. But I don't care that he fought the Disco Inferno, Chuck Palumbo, and one day even Meng, because as far as the courts have decided, this man is a terrible person. And the reason I do say that is because in 2007, he was charged with so many terrible, awful things that he received a sentence of imprisonment for life. I'm sorry, I don't think that happens by accident. I mean, even if you are the worst wrestler alive, I actually kind of respect you for going out there and trying it. And when you are an old so-and-so sitting on the couch, you can be like, well, man, I gave it my best shot, but it didn't work out. Hard Body went the other way, and he ruined people's lives who were totally innocent. And thankfully, at least he got some justice. So again, I don't actually give a flub about what he did in the ring, because everything else is way more important. Number 9, Eddie Steinbl. 0.65 out of 10 is what Eddie did get on Cagematch, and if you do care, a lot of these matches happened in his home country of Germany. You should actually go through the list of wrestlers he has fought as well, because he had an incredibly long career, and he basically took on everyone. He has sadly passed away these days, but once again, he was able to make a go of it when it comes to sports entertainment. But you do just read the same story over and over again when you do check him out. This guy could never really get it going, and he was super duper slow. Steinbl knew the best way to get around this though, so he started his own promotion, and he made himself the champion. I'm sorry, I can't get mad at that. I respect the moxie. So actually, when you do get deep into this, it just sounds like the wrestling industry evolved around him, and he could never keep up, both literally and figuratively. But even then, this does seem a little bit mean. Number 8, Chasen Rance. 0.54 out of 10 in the ring, but once again, who doesn't care? Me. That's because in 2011, he was indeed convicted of having unlawful sex with a minor. Surprise, surprise, the wrestling community was left in shock. That's it too. I'm not going to get into somebody's wrestling career when those things have happened outside of it. We move on. Number 7, Invader 1. And I'm not talking about this one either, because Invader 1 is also known as Jose Gonzalez, who has long been reported as the person that stabbed Bruiser Brody down in Puerto Rico, and after the fact, Brody died. So quite frankly, I don't care about a cage match rating, and if you're not talking about that incident, well, you shouldn't be talking about anything else. Number 6, Jenna Morasa. So this is another one where it's so dumb to put a number next to somebody's name, because she does have a 0.4410 rating, but she was also a celebrity wrestler, essentially. I mean, she came from Survivor. TNA, I suppose, thought they could get some extra eyes on their product, which is when we got to Victory Road 2009, and I guess they walked up to Shamal and said, you can work her. I don't know whether Shamal wanted to or not, but she had no choice. So you shouldn't be surprised to hear that this wasn't good, because shock horror. I'm gonna let you into a little secret. Wrestling is really hard, and if you don't train, you are going to be left behind. Now look, given that both were absolutely okay afterwards, you can actually go back and watch this and have a bit of a chuckle, because seriously, every single thing they try and do, but it just went wrong. It really was irresponsible of TNA, though, not to just be a little bit more patient than this. There's that word again. But actually, when it comes to Jenna, I'm going to do it for a second time. I respect the fact she gave it a go. I mean, there is something to that, and even when you are taking the most basic of maneuvers, well, they hurt as well. None of it feels like a pillow. So bravo to her. Number 5, Rob Black. So this is probably another popularity contest thing, which does make this list silly, but you may remember Rob Black, because he was a super duper controversial wrestling promoter in the late 90s. Now you can Google all of that to find out the information, but in 2001, with his XPW promotion, he decided, you know what, we're gonna have a tag team match, and I'm gonna put myself in it. So Rob did indeed team with Johnny Webb to take on Sabu and Josh Lazy, which is an incredible name, and it is a tag team match with a loser leaves town stipulation, and I think for some reason the world title was involved too. He won, of course, and the fans were not big fans of this, because his rating is 0.44 out of 10. Black would then find himself in a lot of trouble, which once again means he probably shouldn't have been part of this list. I mean, does anybody else think it's a little bit dumb? Yeah, me too. Number 4, Ed Ferrara. What does deserve such spotlights are people like Ed Ferrara, though, because what he did in the late 90s with WCW, well, it was genuinely offensive. Now, you may recognize Edward's name because he did jump to World Championship Wrestling alongside Vince Russo, and these two were essentially responsible with running the company. I can also only assume they are horrible people, because almost straight away, Ferrara had become Oklahoma, which was ripping on Jim Ross, as well as his Bell's palsy. Now listen, you don't have to like JR, you can have any opinion of him that you choose to have, but to insult somebody for having a disease, I'm sorry, you're a piece of trash. It was just so mean-spirited, and soon after this, Ed would also be in the cruiserweight division, where he was fighting Medusa. And that is just ragging on your company too, because do not forget, when WCW did get to the highest of highs, a huge reason for this was because of the Lucha Libre wrestling they were putting on. It's why he comes in at 0.42 out of 10, because even though he was a despicable heel, nobody actually wanted to see him get his ass kicked. They didn't want to see him in the ring at all. So all of this was just bad, and it was horrible, and that's why I'm glad we can include these people in lists like this, because it can never happen again. Number 3, One Warrior Nation. I mean, don't try and rip off the Ultimate Warrior, especially because the WCW had already done that with Renegade, so this was a rip-off of a rip-off happening on the independent scene. I mean, you never stood a chance. No One Warrior Nation was able to get a few bookings, which is why he does have a 0.25 out of 10 rating. And I actually think this comes down to the fact that when people think of the Ultimate Warrior, it lights up their nostalgia gland. So when you see a pretty bad parody, well, you just get a bit pissed off with it. Let's also not forget that the Warrior's plus points were not his wrestling. It was the fact he had this crazy charisma and he had this nuts fire to him. But when you try and recreate that, well, you're not Jim Hellwig, so you're not going to be able to do it. I mean, even though he was super controversial, when you do break it down and look at his run, he did have one of the most unique approaches to wrestling ever. I really don't think anybody else should be trying to recreate it. So I don't think this one should be as low as it is, but again, when you are ragging on people's memories from when they were a child, which is when most individuals love wrestling the most, well, you're walking a very fine tightrope. Number 2, Gable Stefson. 0.22 out of 10. Gable Stefson run in NXT and WWE is nuts. Now, Gable did talk about his departure recently and basically put it down to wrong place, wrong time, and even said the relationship is perfectly fine, so maybe he comes back again in the future. Ultimately, though, Gable didn't have any real matches throughout his few years there, apart from that match at the Great American Bash against Baron Corbin. And I think this has got out there now. Baron had a really hard time with this. This Baron Corbin, man, he can work with anyone. There's also many former NXT stars who are all like, oh man, I was there with Stefson, and he did not take the opportunity that was presented to him. So this one just feels destined to never have worked out. And again, he barely only had like a handful of matches. I don't actually see how we can rate him at all. Number 1, Bubba the Love Sponge. I mean, good grief. I mean, it is just another piece of evidence that when Hulk Hogan was in TNA, any sense of power should have been removed from his fingertips, because he hired his friend, Bubba the Love Sponge. I mean, it really was down to the fact that him and Hulk were buddies, so Bubba just started hanging out on TNA TV. And do you know what TNA didn't need during this time? It was someone called Love Sponge. Now actually his 0.10 rating is based off cameos he had back when ECW was around and independent promotions, mostly because when he was in TNA, he was just super duper offensive and apparently did something backstage to Awesome Kong, which is one of the reasons she left the company. If that is true, you picked Bubba the Love Sponge over Awesome Kong? I will never forgive you. I mean, it's just the likes of nepotism at its very worst. And listen, if a celebrity does come in, you have to understand your lane. Unless you're like Floyd Mayweather, if you've sort of broken out into the mainstream, that changes all the rules. But dare I say that did not apply to Bubba. So I don't really understand why people have headed to Cagematch to review this guy. And he's not the worst wrestler of all time, even though I'm crapping on my own list. But he was barely a wrestler, and we shouldn't even dub him with that term. I really do not mind anybody coming in to try and be a sports entertainer, even if you do use your fame. But yeah, anyway, I think we've kind of summed it up. Now listen, if you have any actual entries for this, make sure you drop them in the comments below. Before you like the video, share the video and subscribe. And if you would like more of me ranting and raving about wrestling, and it's an interesting question, you can click the video on the screen right now. Otherwise, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much for joining me and have a delicious day. Shouldn't have said that. That was dumb. I will see you soon.